Hello?
Hey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. I wear my shelter shirt in tribute to the. Did you know I have that?
Mm, You know what's fucking weird is that there's a part of me that does, but I don't know how I would know that.
It's been, Jen found my box of old t-shirts that I don't wear but don't want to get rid of, but I think they're cool, but I don't imagine they're valuable. Like maybe they're valuable on eBay, but I'm not going to get on eBay to sell them.
Right.
And so you eats through those. So they but this has resurfaced in my life recently. Yeah,
I love it. I wore a Paradise Garage shirt.
I don't know what it is.
The Paradise Garage, classic disco club
Oh,
in
all
the
right,
80s, Larry Levan, that whole world.
all right.
Um,
You like doing these? You're feeling good about them?
I am. I
Counting
mean,
on you because this just feels weird to me.
really?
I mean, it's nice to talk to you, but then I see this little number of people watching.
Um, Say hi to the people. They're here for you.
Hi. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean it gets better. It gets more natural over time. At first I'm sort of like I was super self-conscious and then now it's feeling more natural.
Yeah. Yeah.
I usually start with a couple of things to kind of like just keep context of what I'm doing and sort of like make sure that this doesn't get relegated into the realm of music interviews. Because so realistically, what I'm doing here are two things. One is that I'm trying to aid people in staying the fuck home and sort of giving them something to do at home. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people have been asking about archiving these and things like that. And I'm kind of okay with just letting them be ephemeral and just letting them be about now and this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing. Um, and the other thing is talking about antimatter, which a lot of people coming to this particular site. One person I couldn't really, honestly couldn't tell whether or not this was real. One person actually did ask, "What's a zine?" And
I mean,
it could
I
be.
got this shirt in '91.
Yeah. I mean, look, it could be, right? So
Um,
the two things that I like to do in the beginning to sort of ground the conversation. So one is to talk about the zine or zines. And so we'll start there and then move into the second part, which is stay the fuck home. So, so the first part is I tried to go into my old antimatters to see, did I ever talk about you in any way? Did I ever talk about Captain Jazz? Or did it just sort of get there at the cutoff and I just missed it in the zine? So I was able to find an oblique reference.
I do remember the first time we met when 108 and Captain Jazz played together.
I wouldn't have been there.
You wouldn't have been there?
No. Definitely
So
not.
in my memory, in Lincoln, Nebraska.
No. I was my earliest memory of anybody out there was when I met Jason Genevico.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Shelter and he was in None Less Standing, and we played in Madison together and stayed at his house.
Yeah.
So
And I remember him and Davey, those guys playing the Text is the Reason demo all the time.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what this is
You
that I found.
There was a guy. There was the guitarist of 108 was wearing like a toga. No, that's not the word, but
It's called a Doty.
yeah. And so in my memory, and it was just so intense in a punk show in Lincoln, Nebraska. And in my mind, I've replaced that guy with you.
Okay.
But confirmation one way or the other.
Yeah. So this I thought was humorous. So this is the final issue of Antimatter from summer of 1995. And I'm actually reviewing the Promise Ring demo. And it begins, I remember reading somewhere that the Promise Ring were ex-members of someone interesting, but I don't particularly remember who. So there's sort of like an oblique reference there.
Yeah.
But
I mean, still kind of how it rolls for me. We were just playing these shows in Italy, and it's how people come up and talk to you after the show, oh, cool show, I love your band or whatever, people just are like, so what's Mike really like? And like, you know what the American football tuning is? I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm meeting the brother of the guy from American football. So members of something interesting still.
But to be fair, Mike probably had years where people asked him a lot about you.
I don't know. He was because he was the drummer.
Yeah, I mean, come on. He was the kid brother. Jason Genevico says hi. I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh, hi. No, this is what's weird about this format, which I think is happening on Zoom and stuff. I just haven't used any of that yet. I know people are doing it. Is the like seeing my own face while I talk,
Right.
which is just not a.
So that's why I try to stare at you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I look at you. Yeah.
So, right. So, okay. So then it's related to Zine World. So in the book, I added a bunch of things in the end from interviews and things that appeared in other places. So when I interviewed you for Alternative Press in, it probably would have been 96 or something, 7. You said this, and I sort of always wanted to ask you this. So you said, me and Davey got to know each other by writing letters and trading fanzines. Mine was a holiday special called This Trees in Season, This Trees in Season. And Davey's had something to do with how fast to draw a circle around a human heart or something like that.
Yeah.
So what the hell was that zine about?
Oh man, I did it. I think I only did like 3 issues, maybe 2, maybe 4. I'm gonna guess 3. And it was just like an annual thing I made maybe 20 copies of. And it was like, you know, it was just those sort of like typewriter and Xerox machine, is not Xerox, typewriter and like Kinko's. Everyone had a friend who worked at Kinko's overnight and you can make them. Yeah, and it was this tree, this trees in season, like a picture of a Christmas tree, and then you'd flip it over and it'd say this trees in season, like treason, and it was my like happy hollow days was the other part of it. It was like a Christmas thing, so it was like like empty days, like DAZE.
Yeah. So what was in it?
I mean, probably a lot of it became Captain Jazz lyrics. It was just sort of like, you know, they were like those zines that were like 16th of the size of like a like a gift book.
You really splurged.
Those little zines that were just, maybe they were quarter size one, where you would just kind of like layer the photocopy, you know, artful, poetic fragments.
Yeah. All right. I was always curious. It seemed like I've never seen it. I was like, what the hell is it about?
Well, never has, but, I found there's, I bet they all just became Captain Jazz lyrics. I found one copy of one maybe 5 or 7 years ago in a box and was like, oh, right, weird. But, you know, that impulse, I remember very well, late 90s, early 2000s, like, some people had aesthetic sensibilities for what their bands wanted to be, you know, like guiding principles and standards. And I had this idea of like an annual zine that was sort of like, and sometimes my bandmates would be like, well, this kind of song can't fit on the same record as this kind of song. And I would be like, yes, they can, because they were written in the same, like if the time was the frame, you know, that everything within that time fits inside of it. And I don't, it's a different kind of world now with the internet, which is weird because now, like this week, a Friend Enemy record we recorded the month of Trump's election came out last week. We recorded a final Joan of Arc record 2 years ago that will be out next year. So it's like we're actually recording these things and then they just sit for 2-3 years before they come out.
Why? Just,
I mean, it's not up to me. I'm not.
that's just the scheduling. That's just how it went.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, it was, it used to be a very different thing to make a record. Obviously, you would have to manufacture an object.
Right.
But
Right.
go to a designated place at a designated time to record it. It would arrive at a designated place to buy it. You would need to like have the object itself. So yeah, so
And you would need access to the object, which I think is like a whole other sort of scenario that we take for granted now because it feels like we have access to everything.
Right.
And
so,
it's one of the reasons why I think like I sort of am enjoying the idea of these things as being, temporary.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, there's something about just sort of just having it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is about the zine thing, in terms of the records just being like not about an aesthetic, a unified aesthetic sensibility, but like an issue of like, all right, here's this year, like this is what happened. And that doesn't seem like a thing that's possible anymore. So those zines that you brought up, like I only made 50 copies of 3 issues that I like sold for 35 cents or something. But that sensibility did totally inform like the beginnings of how I made records.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so the second part of that was getting back to sort of the stay the fuck home part.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do, which might be a little morose, is I at the beginning of each of these, I like to go through where we're at in the numbers in America right now, just so people understand that shit is happening and it's real. So when we started doing these on Thursday, we were at 74,982 cases in America with 1,078 deaths. As of about an hour ago, we are almost double that, 152,631 cases, and 2,817 deaths. So just in the 3 episodes that we've been doing this, 78,000 new cases and 1,739 deaths. So that's real talk. And it's one of the reasons why, we're doing this here, to kind of just encourage people, number one, to stay inside and take care of themselves and take care of each other. And also, we're not going to necessarily dwell in that, but your story particularly right now is relevant. And I sort of want to talk to you a little bit about that as well. Because the big question I have, I read, for people who don't know, Tim recently wrote an article for Chicago Magazine about his experience in Italy, which was very recent. He just came back a few weeks ago. And I read the article, but it was still sort of unclear to me, and I think because probably it's unclear to you. Did you and Jenny have COVID-19?
I would love to know, because I would be working at the grocery store at this moment if I knew for sure.
Right.
But like when my cousin has a house in southern Italy. He lived in London forever. He's mid-50s, no family. Excuse me. So, he bought this little house, and if you live in London, it's like an hour flight for $40. And he was always like, you gotta go stay, you gotta go visit. For the first time since I was like 19, I had no record label, no booking agent, no management. So I've been floundering career-wise, creatively, 2 very separate things.
Right.
So creatively, I'm at a peak, but business-wise, nothing to do with, like, can't give it away. So we're like, man, okay, now's the time. We're just gonna go stay at my cousin's house. And we had someone to help us book shows. Our friend Luca, who's not even a booker, he's like a promoter, does a label. We were there for 1 week, and like just the feeling in our bodies and like how we would spend our time, like we were reading more than we've been able to read, like just being free from the like double speak, you know, disingenuous upside down world of Trump. And, you know, it does feel like literally totalitarianism to me, because we all have to talk about him all the time. Like he
Right.
dominates our thinking. And just, we were there for 1 week before we felt like different people. And we were like, oh my God, we're like our old selves. Like I just spent an hour reading prose poems or whatever, like some things that like I haven't been interested in America for years because I'm too busy being like, is he gonna kill me now? Or
Right.
who kill now? Like,
Right.
and then like trying to it. So, anyways, it felt amazing to be there. But we were there for, we landed. You know, it's pretty remote area of Italy. So by the time we got there, it was January 18th. January 25th, we played Milan. By January 28th, I was sick.
And how would you describe what you had?
Oh, I mean, we were just like, wow, this is the weirdest, worst flu ever, but only for lack of like better language. You know, it's like you and me, right? Like we know punk rock so well. If someone said Bad Brains and Minor Threat sounded the same, we'd be like, like what?
Right.
Like, that doesn't sound the same at all.
Right.
But like to someone with no, so you know, I'm not a doctor,
Right.
but I've had some flus, so I was like, it's kind of like the flu, but there was no like, so eventually Jen took me to the emergency room, and their first question was, had you been to China? And then she got sick, and
How soon after?
you know, I was sick and we were still traveling and playing shows, because it was like, you know how it is when you're on tour, like
Yeah. I've played with the worst flus and
yeah,
like just threw up after the show.
yeah.
Yeah.
uh and we had no sense. I just thought like yeah, just that's what you have to do. Like I'm not coming back to Naples anytime soon, you know, so
Right.
like, it needs to happen. Jen did a pretty good job of holding off not catching it until we were home back in Galatina. And then pretty immediately she got it. It was exactly a week after I was in the emergency room that we had to take her to the emergency room. And there was a big shift in emergency room procedures by then. Like no one was talking about COVID-19. They just asked me, had you been to China? But then they gave me like chest x-rays, which I've been to a couple emergency rooms in different countries. I guess that's part of being in bands. But, you know, it looks like weird Terry Gilliam film technology, like to be a weird Italian x-ray machine. It looks like all 60s sci-fi. So I was there on a Sunday. The next Sunday we brought her, and
Same place too.
same emergency room.
Wow.
But 1 week later, she's allowed to sit in the waiting room while I'm in there, but I'm not allowed to wait in the waiting room for her. All the doctors and nurses suddenly have masks on. They didn't isolate me in the same way that they immediately isolated her. So it's like the doctors had some sense that maybe it was brewing, but no one, it wasn't like part of the popular knowledge or common knowledge around.
Right. So I was going to say, by that point, had you even heard of coronavirus or COVID-19 or anything?
It was like, you know, it was like the third headline on the BBC when I'd glance, and it was like a smaller font and it was far away.
Right.
And I was just like, well, I'm not getting that in my head. Like, I don't, if I start thinking about that, then it's going to ruin a good time. So,
Right.
but we would then, there was only, so we were there 1 week, then I was sick, then she was sick. That took maybe a total of 3 weeks with the two of us sick. Then we had about 3 days we were both healthy. And we went out, and we had made a lot of friends pretty quick, through the shows and through my cousin. And everyone we talked to was just like, oh man, this flu going around, it's a nightmare. Yeah. Never had a flu like that. Like everyone had it.
Oh, wow.
So, and then 3 days later, we were at a friend's house, Populous. Very good. Check it out. A lot more people know Populous than me, so it's funny for me to give him a shout out. But and then it like came on the news after dinner, and that was like our last normal day, and then we were just locked in the house.
Wow.
I think our story may have happened a bit sooner than people in America are experiencing, but it's not like I don't feel like I have any unique experience with this now. It was, it's like,
Right.
it's the same thing everyone's dealing with. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, so right now, in New York, it's insane, right? Like, I just read this morning they're building a hospital in Central Park. They've done the Javits Center is now a hospital. It's almost half of the cases in America are here. So we're sort of looking at it. We're sort of looking to Italy, honestly, as a sort of like, what do we do, what do we don't do kind of thing, because I mean, Italy's not the size of America. It's probably more the size of New York in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so there's a sense of, what can we learn from that scenario? I do think that it's interesting to me. Like, I'm curious if that moment when you said you watched the news that night, was there sort of like a single moment that you can point to? Because for me, I feel like there was a single moment when shit got real, basically, when you just started to realize this is way more than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, we were supposed to go, I can't remember the exact dates now, but we were supposed to go up north and stay at this woman, our friend who was tour managing us, and like sort of host this residency at this recording studio there. And it was like 2 weeks and we were getting paid, and like people applied and we chose who we were going to collaborate with. It was like having like a summer school class,
Yeah.
to like record with us. I mean, this is like a low standard of when it started to really get real, because I was already like this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. I mean, like in a way, I made this film Orchard Vale in 2005. It's like the only film I ever like wrote and directed feature length, and it's sort of about right now. Like everyone who is involved in it has like hit me up in the last week or two, being like, "Wow, this is crazy. We're in the movie." But so where we were supposed to go for the residency was then the first quarantine zone. And that was very real, because then it was like, this is about 8 hours north of us. And it was like, if our residency had been scheduled 1 week earlier, or if the quarantine happened 1 week later, like we would have just been locked in there. And like, I don't have the disposition for that.
No. I would have freaked the fuck out.
I don't know.
But at the same time, so I don't know if you read the post that I wrote about you this morning.
Oh yeah, I did.
And when I was thinking about you and thinking about you coming on and thinking about your story, I couldn't not think about 9/11, because we were basically there together, and it was, I remember having that same sense of surreality, that what's even real, and
we played Cleveland on the 12th.
We played Cleveland on the 12th. Yeah.
What I remember about that show is the TVs hadn't started showing commercials yet, And that's when people don't remember maybe, but that's when the running thing on the bottom of news channels started on 9/11. Like that wasn't a thing before then. Now it's just always there.
Yeah.
But so I remember playing the show at the Grog Shop and standing on stage, and right, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, you're the audience, and the TVs are on over the bar, and maybe like, I don't know, 40 people showed up or something. And we're standing there playing, and everyone is just like this.
Right.
Like, whole audience just staring at the TV the whole time.
I do remember there was a point where one of us told the club, like, you've got to turn those off. Because it was just like, I mean, you know, what a fucked position to be in, like, where this crazy national trauma unfolds. You know, like, I'm in the middle of the country. I have all of my time and money booked into this thing. I don't know what's real anymore. And and this is like my hometown. I'm watching it like burn down basically. And it's like, you know, the I can't believe we honestly, I mean, we kept going for quite a while. We played a bunch of shows. Like anyone who would have us, we would play. Because I don't think any of us could afford not to, even if, you know, even if the shows weren't that great. But they did, I will say they did provide us, I think, with a community of people who were sharing an experience as awkward and weird and as we didn't understand what the fuck it was. And I always, I'm sure you've heard it because I tell this story a lot because it's my favorite Tim story, from that night at the Grog Shop. Because I remember you were specifically in a daze, like just talking to you before the show and like just sort of experiencing it. I remember just like almost a sense of blankness about you. And I remember when you played, I don't remember what you were saying so much, but I remember like sitting at the merch table with somebody and you would say something and we would be like it
like I was
like you were, it was just like sort of like weird negative stuff.
Well, you know, I mean, I really, well, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Well, so I was going to say, so the thing that I remember the most was that a heckler then said, say something positive. And you just looked at him and said, at least we'll die quickly. And we were just like in the back, like, oh my God.
Yeah, you know, I spent at those, you know, we're around the same age, and you know, we had those like 90s privileged golden years or whatever it was, where we all, I don't know. I mean, it feels like, I mean, there is a real psychological difference. However nefarious foreign policy might be playing out, there's a true psychological difference living in like Obama world, which, like, you know, like like Pride Day would light up the White House with like a rainbow, you know. I saw a picture of that recently and I got weepy because it's just like, that is such a different world to live in, and that matters.
But what you said before is the thing, which is that, and I've said this before, when you think about pre-Trump world, even like Bush, I didn't think about him every day, every hour, every fucking minute. Like, he wasn't in my brain. He didn't have a room in there. Like, every now and then he came out. You know,
and it was horrible, but yeah.
Right. And I'm the same with Obama. Obama's not perfect, but like, you know, every now and then I'd have to think about him. But it's what you said. I mean, there's a thing about someone who just literally takes residence in your consciousness.
Well, and we can all be like, did you hear what he did today or something? And no one's like, oh, he who? It's like, what I would say about the 9/11, my response to it, and kind of my response to this, like, I spent the 90s like obsessed with like Gita Board and like all these sort of like and then into like Chris Hedges and Kunstler with like the long emergency stuff. Like, I that moment, I was at that age, getting out of college, entering the world and being like, do I need to have some job I hate? Or can I just like be a pauper and be like, I justified when I was 24 years old, I felt justified in my life decisions, which I, at this point now feel like I bet my life on being a musician, like in a very literal sense. It was all like, it's the fall of the Roman Empire. What are you going to do? I'm going to be a traveling drunken bard, So,
Right.
so by the time 9/11 came, it's like, yes, of course there was this shock, but I immediately understood it in terms of like U.S. aggression and like blowback, you
Mm.
know? So like, of course it was shocking, but I was sort of psychologically prepared. And the same with this collapse. And I don't mean to be like, oh, I'm good for the collapse. I mean,
Right,
like,
right,
terrifying, but it's insane.
right.
But like I said, I also made a movie about this 15 years ago.
Right. You've been sort of thinking about these things for a minute.
I've been waiting more than, yeah. I've always, when I'm on tour, I've always wondered, I wonder if I'll get trapped here, which is a crazy thing to say for someone who travels 100 or 150 days a year.
Yeah.
But that's always been my thinking, like, is it going to happen while I'm in this spot?
I mean, it's funny. I've never felt that up until just now when I was in London.
Yeah.
I remember the last few days of the trip, like, I don't believe in God, and I was kind of praying, like, oh, please don't let me get sick before my flight. Like, I don't want to get trapped. Like, and I love London, but
Yeah.
I was like, that's not how I want to immigrate here.
Well, and we're still, yeah, and we're currently in Green Bay at Jenny's parents' house because we've subletted our place. And it's just like this, like, logistical nightmare of like, there's two subletters, one who never actually made it to Chicago because he was freaked out about the virus and didn't want to leave home. The other one lost both of his jobs, same as everyone else. But we also lost all of our income. So now the landlady is like, yesterday she was like, I'm going to use your security deposit. And then today she's like, she actually texted me to tell me that John Bon Jovi has some kind of project that maybe I should try to collaborate with him to make the rent.
I would pay to see that.
Cut it up. Olga. Yeah.
But so this sort of like brings me to another topic that I feel like I've spoken with you about before a little bit, and I kind of want to, I like getting like little updates about this because I think this is relevant to people who make music and art in general, which is the concept of being a lifer, right? Mm. Like, so far in your life, you're sort of as much of a lifer as one can be.
Yeah. Awesome.
You've been in the game since high school, at least.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like you're stopping. And yet at the same time, you know, you were talking about how, and we've talked about this too, that sort of tension between the creative and the business. Yeah. That's always going to be there, right?
It's crazy.
So,
I feel like, I mean, I feel like the last Good Fuck record, like there's an EP after that, but I feel like we had a sign in our studio at home that said, it's record's called Cherry Tree, and we had this like sign above the workstation, Cherry Tree or Die. And it was just like, this is the one, we're gonna make this happen, you know? And it's like, I'm getting 35, 40 rejections from different labels, 35, 15 different booking agents just being like, sorry, man, bottom line's not there. People I've been friends with for like 20 years, and there was like, yeah, the world doesn't need one more Tim Kinsella record. And it's like, I get that. Like, if I went to the record store, do I want to get the 10th record I own by this guy, or do I want something new? So I get that, but also like, I'm way better than I used to be at like making music. I've mastered it, and now no one's interested. So but whatever. I mean,
so how does that sort of like, it's funny. Like this week, I actually rewatched that Noisy thing, mm-hmm. And this is why this train of thought came in, because one person, I think I want to say it was whoever your studio collaborator was for that record, Mike, is it?
Oh yeah, the engineer Mike, yeah.
Yeah. He said, I think it was him who said something to the effect of like, on one level, Tim cares so much, or on one level, Tim doesn't give a fuck, and on another level, Tim cares so much. I think for me anyway, personally, I feel like it's impossible for me to make art and not think about the response in some way. Like I know in the movie Devendra Banhart, it was sort of like, if you're thinking about making money, you're doing it wrong or something. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but at the same time, it's like, I guess it's difficult to measure success without trying to quantify it in some way.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
It gets, yeah, it fucks your head up.
I was in the psych ward this summer because of the music business.
Right.
Like yeah, I don't know. If I was you know, maybe my mom is watching, I shouldn't say this or something. Like, maybe it sounds rude, but like, if let's say I had a kid right now, it told me it wanted to play music, I would like break its hands. No. It's like a life destroyer. It's an ego destroyer, a spirit destroyer. Because it's like, you know, I've known junkies, and it's like, life seems kind of simple for them because they're like, all I have to do today is this one errand. I got to get this thing. And if I get this thing, the day is perfect. Right. If I don't, the day's a nightmare. And making music is kind of like that for me. But also, I get that. You know, like, when I, you know, like, here, check out this, like, we're in Jen's parents' house in Green Bay, you know, like, wait, I can't see what I'm pointing. How do I do this?
There you go.
Yeah, like, we got this very nice little home studio set up now.
Right.
So it's like, I feel better than I have in, I don't know, 6 weeks or something, because I can concentrate. But it is also like, what was I talking about? I don't know. There's no choice.
Do you feel that, though? Do you feel like there's no choice?
About making music?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like, I guess, because I would never recommend it to anyone. I think all the time, like, when I was a little kid and I was like obsessed with Kiss, and they had like the Animalized documentary, maybe one of the Kiss documentaries has this moment with Paul Stanley, like, laying on this bed topless with like 8 women in bikinis, and he's like, if anyone asked me, you know, and I watched this over and over as like a 10, 11-year-old, and he's like, if anyone asked me, should I be a musician, should I go for my dreams, he's like, I would say, obviously go for it. Look how it turned out for me. And I would say the exact opposite. Any kid that wants to play music right now, it's like, fuck that. You're going to be 45. People you thought were your friends for 20 years, do not your back. Like,
but so, okay, but obviously different people approach it differently, right? So, like, this was something that I think I experienced in the 90s a lot, especially in New York, which was a little different from Chicago in the sense that, like, New York, all of our peers were on major labels, right? You know, so like when we first came up, it was Quicksand, Civ, Orange 9mm, Sick of It All was on a major label, Into Another. I mean, like, holy shit, everybody's on a major label. I guess we should be on one. Right. But here's the thing that I saw that was like really interesting to me. There were people who, when they signed, they thought, that's it, golden ticket. You know, Willy Wonka's here. We're you know, we're gonna do it. This is my career. This is my life. I'm a lifer now. But when it doesn't work out, it becomes like devastation. Right. Total devastation. And because you didn't have any sort of backup. Like, my thing that people would always say to me was like, when I was doing the band, I was also writing. I was like trying to find, I was working at a publishing company. I was trying to keep that job while doing, and people would be like, why are you doing that? Why you just dive into the bands? And my thing was like, because I'm not Bob Dylan, and there's a chance this big that I'm going to be like 68 years old and still doing this. So I gotta keep my options open.
Yeah, envious of that. I think about that one big disappointment of being dropped from a major label, and like being like, I've really flattened the curve of personal disappointment and career failure. I've like I've never had a spike of success that could then like collapse. I just had like one long, slow decline. So I guess I don't have a choice because it just,
Well,
yeah.
so okay, but wait. So how did it feel in, like, what was it, like, it's 10 years ago now already, doing the Captain Jazz stuff,
Oh yeah,
where you were just playing to like ridiculous amounts of
yeah,
people?
yeah.
What did that do to your brain? Like, how did that affect in the long term of your
Man,
sort of
that's
psyche?
the best job in the world. Like if, I mean, I don't feel like connected to those songs or something. Like I don't feel, I think it probably took it took 15 years before we did the first show. And it probably took that long because I had enough in common with the guy that wrote those songs that I was like a little freaked out by them or something. But are you kidding? Compared to like being a janitor or like teaching freshman composition, like hell yeah, I want to be the singer of Captain Jazz. That's like the job on earth. Like I and it's so fun. Like I jump around on people and they give me a lot of money. Yeah, I wish we could do it all the time, but can't.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish more than that. Obviously, I wish that like people. I wish I could somehow connect the like teenagers that discover Captain Jazz to Good Fuck, or even like I don't know. I don't feel like we get like our records don't get reviewed or like yeah, like there's no press. Like the last record I made that had a publicist involved, we like had a we had like a conference call where he asked me and Jenny why we don't do more Instagram stories. We were like, wow, that's like, oh, you're really good at this job. Like, cool, we're driving around playing to 8 people. Like, yeah, whatever.
um the uh the other thing about that, I want to sort of get back into, somebody was mentioning in the comments here about how playing music can't be as bad as academia. And
Mm.
you mentioned teaching. I also was teaching for 5 years, so I have my own opinions.
Yeah.
But how did you approach that? What
Uh,
was your sort of like, what was your teaching story?
I mean, I loved it. I taught various creative writing classes, various humanities classes. You know, it was definitely that thing where it was like, I taught like popular culture and media study classes. I taught at city colleges, and I also taught at like University of Chicago's continuing ed or night school and the Art Institute, and like, so I taught at like very rich kids and very poor kids and very like different stratas, and it definitely is true that like the old saying of like, what class are you teaching this semester? I'm teaching Tim Kinsella 101. You know, like in my mind, they all fundamentally came back to like, uh, obviously I was like I wasn't trying to make these people meet. The joke in the office at the Art Institute was I used to call my class Subculture Indoctrination 101. And that's what mattered to me, was like expanding people's minds of what's possible. I don't think I'm humble bragging. I didn't even notice these. I've been ignoring them. But it's like the idea is, right, like we're all controlled by like our subconscious or whatever, but like the more you can become aware of what's motivating you that you're not aware of, the greater sense of self-determination you have, right? The more you understand the forces in the world, the objective forces and the internal forces, the greater sense of self-determination you have. I feel like that's what I'm doing with music. Like ultimately at like the primal level, I want people's hearts and minds to open. I want to light people up when they hear it, you know? And so teaching at its best was that. At its worst, I bartended one shift on a Saturday night, 7-hour shift, and I made $2 more than I made 2 weeks of teaching full time at a college.
Right.
And it was like, well, what am I
like teaching is very respectable, but at the end of the day, they pay you shit.
And there's no, yeah. And it's like, okay, I invested 80 hours to make this $500, or I invested 7 hours. So
right.
so I couldn't be a musician and teach.
Yeah, that was definitely, it was an interesting, the 5 years that I spent doing it were definitely the best of times and the worst of times. I definitely had like, I remember one class in particular that I felt very excited about because they were definitely, I only taught at city colleges. And so this was a class of kids who were, I don't remember what the official designation was, but they were essentially supposed to be a difficult class.
Mm.
And I remember going in thinking like, oh, I'm going to have to dumb things down. But they were so up for it. They wanted to be challenged. They were sick of sort of being like, you know, yeah. And so I just gave it to them like that. And I gave them like a real class and probably taught them beyond what I would normally teach a freshman comp class. And they were just 100% there for it. And I was so excited and it made me want to teach. On the other end of that, I've taught classes to seniors who basically were just looking at me as an obstacle to their degree. Yeah. and I was just like,
Definitely had it both ways of like, you know, yeah, I don't.
So now you're in your isolation. You've been back for a few weeks. What's sort of, and we're just talking now federal guidelines up, you know, pushing it back now to April 30th, which is like a long time to think about now. So, how are you coping?
I mean, like, I'm like pretty. I'm like a pretty solid yin yang kind of guy, you know. Like, I've been joking for years that I have two emotions, coffee and beer. But like now, I'm like running longer and further each day, and I'm eating more and more Merck's spreadable cheese, and like I'm like every day I'm a chocolate eater, but now I'm like chocolate and pizza and Merck's cheese through the roof. So yeah, yin yang is deepened. I'm also like a guy who's pretty happy to not leave the house most of the time. It's just pretty weird to not be able to. Yeah,
that's the thing I'm finding for me. Because if you leave me to my own devices, I'm in my house 98% of the time.
Right.
But just knowing that I can't go out, or that when I do go out, it's actually like, it feels negative.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Like I tweeted the other day that I'm looking forward to a time when I can maneuver the 3 blocks between my house and the supermarket like I'm not Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
Because that's what it feels like.
Yeah. It's weird when I'm out running each morning. There's like there's some people that we pass each other and we wave, and there's like a sign of solidarity. But this, you know, like I said, I'm not in Chicago. I'm at Jenny's parents in Wisconsin, so it's not like familiar ground to me. But there's like some people you like smile and wave from afar, and then there's other people that are just like a human. So
right. That's how it feels in New York right now. That's pretty much everybody is just like, don't get away from me. And it's like, I mean, New York's like that a little bit, but not, not like this. I've been here my whole life, never seen it like this.
Yeah.
So, all right, I asked you to prepare a song.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that a second. So you're actually the first person who really took the challenge, and I knew you would because that's your personality. And I figured you haven't played the song in forever.
20 years. Yeah. I've never tried a solo version. I remember we didn't even play it live much when it came out, because I remember when we recorded it, And it was sort of like a, hit, for lack of a better word. People liked this one.
Yeah.
But I remember like being in the studio recording it, and Casey, who recorded, we recorded half our stuff with Casey Rice and half with Elliot Dix, and we had like a real formal sense of like, these are the Casey songs, these are the Elliot songs. And then on Live in Chicago, we like swapped those, which was part of like the big formal move for that. But then I remember finishing mixing this song, and Casey, who was Tortoise's sound man at the time, like turning to me, and they had this single Gamera that came out, Gamera, I think, that was like one long kind of, it was like a 12-inch, really cool. And then like I remember Casey finishing the mix and then turning to me and being like, well, you guys sure ripped off Gamera in a way that you haven't ripped off anything else. And I was like, damn. Like, so
it just fell to the
yeah, so it was sort of like every time we would play it, I'd just kind of be like, I don't want to play that. We kind of ripped it off without, sometimes you do that without knowing you did it. So
I actually was just, I don't know if you've heard this. If you haven't, it's amazing quarantine material. I'll tell everybody about it. There's a podcast called Reply All.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard the Case of the Missing Hit?
No.
Oh my God. It's the greatest episode ever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So basically the Case of the Missing Hit is about a guy who has a song in his head that he's singing, and his girlfriend is like, what's that song? And he's like, everyone knows this song. It's from the 90s. It was on the radio. And she's like, I've never heard that before in my life. What are you talking about? He goes home, tries Googling it, YouTubing it, does this whole thing, like can't find it anywhere. He's like, what the fuck? I know I didn't make this up. He actually multi-tracks a version where he's like singing all the instruments, and like he's going to try to Shazam it to see if he can find it. He couldn't find it. Anyway, so then he goes to Reply All and basically says, you have to help me find this song. And the entire episode is the case of that song. And it's incredible.
I'll check
from
it out.
beginning to end. But there's a part in the episode where a neuroscientist is talking about, she was a neuroscientist / used to be a record producer. And she was talking about, and I want to say it was Steven Stills or something, was recording an album in the studio where she was working. And she opened the door and she's like, I don't remember what song it was, but it was a song that was on the radio at that time. And she's like, oh, you guys are covering this song? He's like, we just wrote it. And she's like, no, you didn't. So that is like one of my biggest fears.
Yeah.
Because we do internalize music in a way that like it can come out 2 years later and you'll be like, I wrote that.
That was I was always terrified with like Make Believe specifically, because we were like so different than my other bands. And I was always afraid that there was like some like really corny kind of like bro metal thing that we were ripping off. Like I was afraid that there was some scene we belonged to that we weren't aware of, Like me and Jack, when we were in Italy, we like found this phrase on this monument, Tudi Akadudi, which we're like, oh, that's such a cool, cute phrase. And it meant to all the fallen. And it was like, and we started saying Tudi Kadudi to each other all the time because it's, easy, fun phrase. And then we like bring it up to a friend of ours there. We're like, yeah, we're thinking about including Tudi Kadudi in our record. And he's like, oh, cool. Yeah, that's a Mussolini phrase. Like, that's fascist? It's such a cute...
It's cute fascism.
Yeah. Well, let me play the song. I want to... Okay. I got.
So real quick, just...
I'm the only one. I'm the only one that complied with the request for which.
No. So this is the difference. So basically, like my plan was that I pick the song no matter what.
Right.
Right. So in the first episode, Jeff Rickley just completely was like, no.
Yeah. Well, that was
so I was like, all right. And then in the second episode, Jeremy from Touche Amore was just like, I can't do anything by myself.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, fair enough. So I got Jonah Matranga to play a song. So, but you were the one who really took it to a place because I knew that you couldn't play it like the album. But I
Yeah, yeah,
think
of
that
course.
there's a very strong melodic element to the song that I think I've always loved. And so I just wanted to see what you do with it
Oh,
alone.
yeah. Well, let's see how it goes. I don't know. I don't know how it'll the sound quality. This is what I can do.
You're good. You're good. we this is the basement show of talk shows. That's what I'm telling everybody.
You got such a pretty voice, but you got a good soul. Fucked up to sing. Fucking cuts is funny on more, yeah. You're dumpty, bumpty, cunty, runty, dumpty, bumpty, bumpty, runty, bumpty years old. So make it close to me versus the looks of me. On a list of communication, yeah, try to grab her calendar. All this Wi-Fi makes me wonder. Good Lord, symposium. So I'm some musical words she wish she'd never been born. In a language of such silence, and you're always using cool. You've got such a pretty voice, but you gotta get so fucked up to sing. You've got such a pretty voice, but you gotta get so fucked up to sing. Okay, that's the best I could do. Thank you. It's actually like the song is like 30 seconds, and then the rest is just like synth
Bleeps and
shells
bloops.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean it's cool. I don't know if you saw it or not. When Jeff's episode, I actually learned one of his songs in 2 hours, and just
Oh.
like I may have murdered it, but I thought it sounded all right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, thank you for the prompt.
And somebody actually, it
Truly,
was funny.
truly quarantine. But if you had asked me that any other time in the history of my life. Hello?
Yeah.
Maybe that, so it just cuts you off. We're talking to
Instagram cuts you off after an hour.
Okay. We're going on too long. That's all right. Okay.
No, that's perfect. I'm just glad it didn't happen while you were playing.
Yeah. So that was understood. Thank you.
So, but I was in the middle of saying something, wasn't I? What we were talking about? Oh, I was thinking when you were playing, somebody made a comment that it looked like the fireside ball.
Oh. That, yeah.
It kind of does.
Yeah, I'm a little better mode too.
All right. Well, we're just about wrapping up anyway. So
okay.
I just
thank you so much for having me, Norm.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody for logging in.
Thank you for everyone who joined us. Yeah.
And staying the fuck inside. And this is happening all week, 3 p.m. Tomorrow, I want to say, is Richie Birkenhead, who I love and adore, from Underdog and Into Another. So everybody, please come in for that. And thanks again, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Norm. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.